Welcome to Beat Diabetes. Today we're going to hear from a truck driver and a former soldier who crushed diabetes without taking one metformin pill. Well, folks, we've got a first for us in our Beat Diabetes interviews, and this is a truck driver. I've heard from several truck drivers, but this is the first one that I have interviewed. His name is John Julian. John, welcome to Beat Diabetes.
Oh, hello, Dennis, and thank you for having me.
Well, it's a blessing to have you, and from looking at some of the notes you have left me, it looks like you have quite a bit of diabetes in your family. Is that correct?
Yeah. So my grandmother and my grandfather on my father's side had type 2 diabetes. My father has type 2 diabetes, and my grandmother on my mother's side has been borderline diabetic, pre-diabetic, so to speak, for the better part of 50 years. So I've watched it take its toll on my family over the course of my entire life.
So let's talk about how you first found out you had diabetes. Did you have various symptoms that made you nervous and you had to go to the doctor to check it out? Or how did you find out that you had diabetes?
I just wasn't feeling well. And I knew that I was getting to middle age, so to speak. And so I wanted to go see my doctor and get checked out and have labs done. And my wife and I had found out we were having a baby. And so I called the VA clinic and set everything up. And they didn't do an A1C the first go around and what have you. But they came back and they told me that my fasting glucose, I think, was like 258. And
fasting.
Fasting. And so then he's like, you're diabetic and we need you back here for an A1C. But I mean, looking back on it, I had the constant urination. I was always thirsty. The fatigue, I was yawning all the time. I didn't feel well. I wasn't healing as well. And I fell into that whole, that's you getting older, right? And so I was like, well, that's just normal.
Yeah, but we need to emphasize that you're not all that old. You told me you're 32 now, so you were having problems even into your late 20s, right?
Oh, yeah. I would say that they probably started around, if I was to look at the classic symptoms, I would say probably 25, 26. That would probably be when I can really pinpoint remembering the constant thirst. And the frequent urination and the lower back pain and the fatigue and what have you. But I think that it probably goes back further than that if I really wanted to be honest with myself.
So the first A1C that you did finally get, what was it?
The paperwork, if I remember correctly, I believe it said 9.8.
What kind of words did you get from your doctor at that point? 9.8, you're close to a 10 A1C. That's quite significant. What did the doctor say? Did he give you advice about what to eat? Did he tell you this is serious? What did he say?
He told me that I was diabetic prior, so then he told me my A1C was through the roof. And he said to me that meat and cheese were the consistent factor in Americans getting overweight. And then he didn't really give me any advice other than here's metformin for your diabetes and here's lisinopril for your high blood pressure that'll protect your kidneys. But I didn't really have high blood pressure. It was more about protecting my kidneys, so to speak, I guess. And so then literally probably 45 minutes after we got off the phone, I started diving into research on diabetes because there wasn't really any information.
So you didn't wait long. I'm kind of guessing, since you've been following my channel, YouTube was one of your go-to research areas.
Well, it certainly helps, given my profession, that I can listen to podcasts from multiple people, such as yourself, or Dr. Ken Berry, or Jason Fung, or Rob Sivas, or any of those people. You know what I mean? I can listen to it, and I can try to retain that information and knowledge as best as I can. And then when I'm not driving, I'm able to then kind of try to go look and dive into that research myself and physically read it. But YouTube is one of my main things because I'm able to listen while I'm working, and that I think that's a great tool.
Now, when a person knows they've got diabetes, but they don't really have a clue which way to go, and they're like you, just desperately searching, seeking, trying to find the direction, there's several different ideas about diet, about the way to either beat diabetes or deal with diabetes or manage diabetes. And I'm sure as you looked at different things and heard different things, you had a choice to make. Did you have any conflicts? Did it take you a long time to decide what you needed to do, or were you able to figure it out pretty quickly?
I would say that within about 2 to 3 days of the initial A1C report, and maybe not even actually, because when he initially said I had diabetes, so just based on the fasting glucose, I dove into that research, and maybe 48 to 72 hours, I had kind of made a decision that I was going to go on the extreme, if not zero carb lifestyle, at least to the effect that I wanted to get my A1C below diabetic range, and then go from there to see how other foods affected me. It didn't take me long.
It amazes me that you found out so quickly and made a good, solid decision so quickly on what to do. And so you ended up cutting your carbs way, way down. You're talking about 20 grams or less per day. And so tell us, what are some of the things you gave up? What are some of the foods that you ended up really leaning on and depending on during this period?
Pretty much 90% of what I would eat during my work week, because I cook on the road. And so my staples would be, I had a rice cooker, so I had to give up that, which would be my main ingredient for my meal, right? And then, so I gave up my staple, and then I started giving up the tomatoes and the chocolate milk, which was my most favorite enjoyable thing on the planet, probably 3 bottles of chocolate milk a day. Wake up and enjoy the morning, have a chocolate milk. If I had a great day that day, have a chocolate milk. If it was a real bad day, have 2 chocolate milks. And that was kind of my go-to thing, right? So I had to take my entire lifestyle as far as my diet, my fuel source, and dump it out and basically start over.
Was that painful?
Surprisingly, not really.
Okay, well, that's good. Now, you remembering that you're a truck driver, I'm curious to know the kind of foods that you ate and how available were they? Was it any kind of a problem for you to find the kind of low-carb foods that you needed while you were on the road?
Basically, in a truck stop, your only options would potentially be a pre-made chicken salad, throw out the croutons, so all you're going to have is the iceberg lettuce, a little bit of cheese that you might question the quality of, and the chicken. And boiled eggs would probably be available. Pork rinds, and that's assuming you read the ingredients, which from your channel and some others, I've learned that that's probably one of the most important things you can do with anything that's packaged is read the label. And so it was kind of difficult at first. So for me, my wife and I will go grocery shopping at our local grocery store, and I will bring home my steak, my bacon, cheese, anything that I can freeze. And so that way I can put it in my small freezer and in my refrigerator in the truck and have access to ketogenic style foods that I can consume, and I'm not eating a lot of carbohydrates. So we have to kind of do that all at home. And then if I know that I'm not going to make it home, I have to try to push myself on the fasting line, a little further maybe. I only got one package of meat to get me home, but there's 2 more days to go. So I'm going to try to make it until tomorrow before I eat again. And at first that was quite difficult. But then the light came on, the epiphany of at 36, 40 hours, I feel amazing right now. I'm not hungry. I don't need to eat. And so then that became a little easier and a little easier. And now I kind of just have a routine. But at first that struggle was very difficult because when you first changed that diet, I came to find that I leaned heavily on pork rinds. My wife would make up like 3 pounds of bacon. And, I was used to the occasional snack that nobody thinks they had, right? Like they go into the gas station and they buy their pop and they buy a candy bar. But then they go home and they're telling their friend they didn't eat that day. Well, you're right. You didn't eat food. You ate poison.
You figured it out pretty early on, what you needed to do. And then I guess as the days and weeks and months went by, you added and kind of amplified your diet. Would that be right?
I took everything that I had thought I knew and I threw that out the window and said I didn't want to end up like anybody in my family, and so then as I began, I was consuming, just trying to fight off the addiction to the carbohydrates. And then I will subscribe to the idea that knowledge is power. And so the more I would listen to you, Dr. Barry, Dr. Rob Sivas, Jason Fung, those are my mains. You guys are all my staple listen to every day, like at least 4 hours a day. Every day I listen to you guys. And so I was like, okay, so if I just do this, I don't need to eat. If I eat a little more of this right now, I will feel satiated and be able to fast longer, which is better for my diabetes and my insulin levels, which I think we all can agree once you kind of figure it out that the insulin is probably more the driver than the glucose, right? You don't find out the glucose until it's been a long time coming.
When I think about long drives that I've been on, obviously I've not been a trucker, but a lot of times in the old days before I knew about the danger that carbohydrates posed to me, I would snack while I drove just almost out of boredom. It was like there's nothing else to do. So, get a bag of chips, get some pretzels, whatever. Did you do that before you really knew you had to cut the carbs? And how hard was that to give up all the snacking that you no doubt did?
Well, I would say that to some degree, I definitely did, right? So my chocolate milk and my bag of chips or my little package of those grandma's cookies or whatever, I may consume while driving. I did try to do the best that I could even beforehand. I started to think, I'm not getting any younger, but yet I keep gaining weight and something's not right. So I would hide all my snacks in the back of my truck so that I couldn't reach them. And you'd at least have to stop to grab something, which was a bit of a help, but in the same token, it's not quite the same, right? And so it was a struggle to combat that then. It was almost like you said, out of boredom, you don't even realize that you're doing it. But then the minute my diet changed, my lifestyle had to change because I'm a diabetic, I got a newborn baby on the way. Then you realize it. It all clicks, right? You're like, wait a minute. I used to snack all day long. You just didn't realize that you were doing it because you're up in the seat for 11, 12, 13 hours a day. And so it's not, you don't even notice. You ate a whole entire bag of potato chips and drank a half a gallon of chocolate milk and you claim that you haven't had anything to eat all day.
So once you understood what you needed to do, which was cut the carbohydrates way down, and you even started doing some fasting. Did you have confidence this was going to work? And what were some of the first evidences that, yeah, this really is working in my life?
I didn't really have any doubts because I knew that carbohydrates were sugar. I knew that starch was sugar. I knew that sugar was sugar. And everything that everybody was saying, it was like, okay, this all makes complete sense to me. And so I didn't really have a doubt about it. And it really wasn't hard to make that leap. So the original diagnosis of diabetes was without an A1C. And I think it was maybe 2.5 weeks after that, he had labs drawn for an A1C. And the first indicator to me was that in that short amount of time, so at the most it was about 2 actual weeks of me putting that diet into place, my fasting glucose went from that 258, and I want to say it was like 151.
Significant progress.
Right. And his first instinct was to tell me how great my metformin was working. And at that point, I hadn't taken metformin at all. So I mentioned that, and that did not go over very well with the medical professional. And I didn't blame him. I still don't blame him. I mean, he only knows what he's told. And he doesn't understand that I'm a truck driver. So if you mail me my prescription in the mail and I'm not home when it gets here, I can't obviously take the prescription you gave me. But it gave me this kind of, I'm going to go against the grain and I'm not going to listen to my doctor, when he thought that it was working. Whatever I was doing was working so well that doctor thought that I was already on it. And so I continued that mission, and I didn't tell him. I said, well, I'll get nervous if. I'll get worried if. And so Mike the meter, as you put it, and I totally love that, would come out. And so when my fasting numbers first got under 100, oh no, that's kind of dangerous. You're diabetic. And I said, yeah, but I'm not taking any of those fancy drugs, so I'm not worried just yet. And so I just kept at that, and that worked out amazingly for me.
Oh, that's wonderful. Now, so the first A1C you took was 9.8, and it seemed like what you're saying is you had already started the low carb a couple of weeks earlier, so it possibly would have been a bit higher than that. But anyway, within 3 months, would that be your next A1C? And what did that turn out to be?
The end of April, I think the labs were drawn for the first A1C, if I remember correctly. And it might have been into May. And then the second one, so due to the virus that shall not be named, I wasn't able to immediately get back in at 3 months. I want to say that it was October. And so that's kind of a little bit of time span, but still it dropped down to 4.9.
Yeah, 4.9 is fantastic. There's a lot of people that are low carb that don't quite get into the fours. And so you went from almost 10, probably you were at 10 when you first got diagnosed, if not slightly higher than that, down to 4.9, basically cut your A1C in half. Well, I think by that point you had it figured out, hey, this stuff doesn't just work, it works fantastic.
Oh yeah, so I determined that about the time, so the first 10 pounds came off really fast. And I was like, I think that's water weight. I think that's bloat weight. And I don't think so. But then all of a sudden I'm down 53 pounds and I haven't changed anything other than what I consume. And I said, okay, this is definitely working. My sugar is good. My fasting glucose is good. I feel amazing. My energy level is up. My mental focus is up. I have all sorts of ambition. And it was pretty easy for me to tell at that point that I was on the right path.
Right. Well, I agree completely. I think the low-carb lifestyle is just a natural lifestyle that works not only to beat diabetes, but helps us in a lot of different ways. And one thing I think, in fairness, we need to say, if for you to be able to get down to 4.9 in the time that you did, without any kind of drugs at all, clearly your pancreas is working well. So your problem was probably never a pancreas that had burned out. Your problem was insulin resistance that was pretty severe. And once you cut the carbs, things just straightened out in a hurry. Would you agree with that?
I'm nodding as you're asking. Yeah, it's I 100% agree. So I think that, like I said before, 4 chocolate milks a day, a bag of potato chips, what have you, right? Like, there's only so many times in a day you can be forcing that pancreas to secrete more and more insulin before the blood cells say, we don't care how much insulin you put out. We're not able to handle the glucose anymore. We're not insulin responsive. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Now, when you had the A1C of 4.9, what should have happened would be your doctor would have been shouting hallelujah, patting you on the back, telling you what a wonderful job you had done. Did that happen?
So my doctor is Eastern European, I'm going to say, right? So it just cracks me up. He calls me up and he says, "Oh, Mr. Julian, how are you this morning?" I said, "I'm not too bad, doctor. How are you?" And he said, "Well, I never thought I'd be saying this, but your diabetes is completely gone. You're a miracle worker." And he was ecstatic, and he never asked me what I did. All he did ask me at that point was whether or not I was still taking the metformin, which, like I had said before, I never had said I wasn't taking it to him just because I didn't want him to have a panic attack after the original statement of I haven't taken it yet. And so I just calmly agreed and said, "Thank you much, and I appreciate that." And so he never asked me anything about my diet. He said it didn't matter. Whatever you're doing, he did a full metabolic panel, so he got everything, cholesterol, all these things. And he said, whatever it is you're doing, you keep doing that. And I said, not a problem. He said, stay away from your sweets. And I said, I don't even want them anymore. I'd just as soon eat a piece of bacon before I have a chocolate chip cookie. And he chuckled, and that was probably the best interaction with a medical professional I've ever had.